Before I do start this video, make sure to use my TCG player affiliate down below if you're looking for any of these singles that I talk about today. Also, this channel is sponsored by Arcane Fortress. If you're looking for the best deck boxes around, make sure to use my link down below in the description to check them out. One other way you can support the channel is by becoming a patron. There are some great benefits of being a patron to the channel, such as giveaways, deck advice, and more when you do join. Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin coming back at you with another video today on PubStomp MTG. With Bloomburrow coming to Magic the Gathering, there is one creature type that I was thrilled to see, and that of course is frogs. Frogs is one of my favorite animals in the animal kingdom. Ever since I was little, I was obsessed with all sorts of frogs, my favorite being the red-eyed tree frog from the rainforest. So when I saw Bloomburrow have a big support for frogs, I basically jumped with joy because I absolutely love them. And of course we did get this very new commander with Helga, Skittish, Seer. But without further ado, let's first read what it does so that we can get an understanding of how we will build around this deck. So for one green, white, and a blue, it's a band color combination commander. The legendary creature Frog Druid does have a power and toughness of 1/3. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain 1 life, and put a 1/1 counter on Helga, Skittish, Seer. You can also tap her, add X mana of any one color, where X is Helga, Skittish, Seer's power. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana costs. So this is quite powerful. This is everything you want in a commander. It gives you card draw. It also gives you ramp, essentially. It'll tap for a lot of mana depending on how much counters it does have on it. So there is easily a lot to discuss with this commander. It's basically just a toolbox for you to basically cast a lot of big giant creature spells. So let's wait no further. Let's get into the deck tech. So now let's discuss the game plan of the deck. There's a lot of different avenues that you can come across. Of course, your commander is getting bigger by 1/1 counters, so why not take advantage of Hardened, Scales, and Branching Evolution? These are just easy ways we could get extra counters on our commander. Instead of just getting one measly counter on it, we could get 2 counters and tap for more mana. In this deck, we are in a little bit of a 1/1 counter theme, so these are going to be excellent outside of our commander, of course. Especially with Branching Evolution, just doubling the 1/1 counters that we put on our creatures is going to be excellent. Because this is a little bit of a 1/1 counter theme, I did want to focus on protection like Ripples of Potential and Mutational Advantage. What I do like about Ripples of Potential, it does act as a defensive or offensive weapon. Of course, if somebody tries to remove our creatures, we could just proliferate all the counters on them and then easily just phase them out. And if one of our opponents are swinging away at us, we could just proliferate if they have a 1/1 counter on them or any kind of counter, and that permanent will phase out if they're swinging against us, so that's a good defensive weapon. And Mutational Advantage is basically just a heroic intervention. Just giving our permanents hexproof and indestructible is perfect, and proliferating is going to give us extra value on top of that. Because we are casting a lot of green spells, why not take advantage of Defiler of Vigor? This is an excellent choice, basically just giving us a cost reduction by Phyrexian mana as long as it's a green mana. And whenever you cast a green permanent spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So cost reduction for those green mana symbols to be Phyrexian mana is going to be perfect in the deck. Because the focus of the deck really is trying to cast a lot of different 4 CMC or higher spells so that we could just keep on putting 1/1 counters on our commander and draw cards and gain life. This will help us out. Instead of losing 2 life, we'll just lose 1 life if we have our commander out on the battlefield. All the while buffing up all our creatures when we cast green permanent spells is going to be incredible. Lost Caverns of Ixalan also brought us some amazing cats like Sovereign Okenek Au and Kutsil Mamelet Exemplar. Sovereign Okenek Au is going to be incredible whenever it attacks for each creature you control. With power greater than its creature's base power, it put a number of 1/1 counters on that creature equal to the difference. So in this situation, if your commander has like 2 1/1 counters on it and you swing with Sovereign Okenek Au, you'll have 2 additional counters be put on it as well. So that way you can just tap for 4 mana. That's going to be pretty great. And Kutsil basically acts as a Grand Abolisher on the battlefield. We don't have to worry about opponents messing with our game plan unless they play like channel type spells. And this could potentially draw us up to 3 cards per turn as long as we're swinging at each opponent. So these are easily some of the greatest includes you could add into the deck, just doubling up your creature's power and toughness with Sovereign and getting some card draw and protection with Kutsil, protecting your turn. Another card that deals with 1/1 counters from Outlaws of Thunder Junction is Railway Brawler. This is an incredible card. It has that ability whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put X 1/1 counters on it where X is its power. And this does have plot 3 and a green, so if you do want to save up for a bigger turn, you could easily plot it later on and then cast it. It will still retain that mana cost when you do cast it and then draw a card with with your commander and put a 1/1 counter on it. And then every creature entering the battlefield after Railway Brawler is going to just get absolutely huge depending on what their power is. I do also want to make sure we're using our commander's ability as effective as we can by tapping for more mana. Concordant Crossroads, we could just tap our commander right away depending on how much power our commander does have, and then we could give all our creatures haste. It'll give our opponent's creatures haste, but that's not a big deal. Legolas's quick reflexes will protect our commander, and this could also act as removal. We could untap our commander and then tap it again, then deal some damage to a creature. And Thousand Year Elixir is another great option, mainly because we could activate our commander's ability right away to tap it, and then if we wanted to, if we had more mana, we could just pay 1 and tap it, untap target creature, tap our commander again for some more mana. This is just a great way where we could just juice out a little bit more mana to cast a big giant creature spell. Speaking of big creatures, I want to focus now on the big boys of the deck. There's a lot of fun ones. First, I wanted to focus on another mana dork with Fanatic of Ronus. Even though it's not a big creature itself, it's basically just a super dork. It can tap for a green mana, but if you do have a creature with power 4 greater on the battlefield, you can tap for 4 mana. And then later on, if it's in the graveyard, you can eternalize it for 4 mana and put it onto the battlefield as a 4/4, and it can activate itself adding 4 mana because its power is 4 greater. When I first saw this commander, my thoughts immediately turned to Goreclaw, mainly because itself is a 4 CMC creature, and it does have creature spells you cast with power 4 greater cost 2 less to cast. I know technically we're focusing on 4 CMC, but most likely a lot of the creatures that are 4 CMC in the deck are going to have 4 power, so that way you can just reduce them by 2. Also, Goreclaw acts as a mini overrun ability. When you do swing with him, all your creatures that you do swing with get +1/+1 and have trample as long as their power is 4 or greater. So this is the easiest include that I've ever included in an entire deck. Another very easy include I did want to highlight is Vaultborn Tyrant. This is one of my favorite cards of the entire year, mainly because it's a dinosaur, but it has a lot of utility. It has whenever this or another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life and draw a card, and of course it will make a copy of itself when it does die. So like I mentioned previously with Goreclaw, most likely 99% of the time the creatures that are 4 CMC or higher are also going to have 4 power or greater. Outside of your commander giving you card draw, this is another way we could get card draw and get more card advantage into our hand. But let's take a look at another dinosaur with 2 different cards with Ghalta Primal Hunger and Ghalta Stampede Tyrant. Ghalta Primal Hunger is a no-brainer in this deck because of course it could be reduced just to 2 green mana, and you can trigger your commander when you do cast it. I think it's going to be very easy to cast Ghalta Stampede Tyrant depending on how big your commander is and how much mana you do have on the battlefield. But in all honesty, this is just a big giant splashy effect so that we could just cheat in a bunch of creatures into play. And that's why you'll notice in this list there's a lot of big giant splashy creatures like Kogla the Titan Ape and Koma the Cosmo Serpent. I wanted to focus on cards that you could actually take control of the game with, because if I'm being quite honest about the commander, really what it is ramp and card draw. So either way, it's going to be a good stuff commander. You want to have a good amount of creatures that will really take advantage of the game. Kogla acts as removal on the battlefield for a creature, and when it does attack, it acts as more removal for an enchantment or an artifact on the battlefield when it does swing. Koma could easily be a nightmare for a lot of your opponents, essentially just controlling the board, tapping everything down on the battlefield. All the while, it could give itself indestructible too by sacrificing the coils. But one thing that's very cool about our commander is we don't have to worry about casting from our hand. We can cast from anywhere as long as it's 4 CMC or higher, so Apex Devastator is going to be a fun addition in the deck. For 10 mana as a 10/10, it has Cascade, 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 and wait for it, Cascade. What's very cool about our commander is the fact that when we do Cascade, if we Cascade into a CMC 4 or greater, we could trigger our commander more and then put more counters on it, gain some life, and draw a card. And depending on what we hit on the Cascade triggers, we could potentially draw 5 cards, gain 5 life, and put 5 1/1 counters on our commander. That's really at the ceiling though. Most likely, if anything else on the floor, you're going to draw 1 card casting Apex Devastator, but whatever you Cascade after that and you have 4 CMC or greater, you're going to be drawing more cards, gaining life, and putting a 1/1 counter on your commander. Our commander though, it does have a big toughness, so I did want to focus on the last March of the Ents. The spell can't be counter draw cards equal to the greatest toughness among creatures you control, and put any number of creature cards from your hand onto the battlefield. Depending on how big of a toughness your commander does have, most likely this is going to be at the last part of the game when you do cast this. You could just draw a bunch of cards depending on the amount of toughness your commander does have, and then just put all creatures on the battlefield that way. It's very similar to Ghalta, but you are drawing cards. I still want to focus on that topic of winning. There's a lot of win cons that we could take advantage of with our commander. Most notably, the one I want to focus on the most is one of my favorite combos of EDH, and that's using Food Chain. If you use this with Mist Hollow Griffin, you could essentially draw your whole entire deck with Helga on the battlefield. Also, you can make Helga into a infinitely large creature depending on how much you go back and forth with Food Chain and Mist Hollow Griffin, and gain a zillion life if you want to. With your whole entire deck in your hand, and with all that mana, you want to make sure you have a win con in your deck like Walking Ballista, where really you could essentially just win the game from there, putting a billion mana into Walking Ballista and blast everybody into the face. I like this combo in here because you don't necessarily need the combo in order to have Walking Ballista fit into the deck. For example, Helga will only produce mana for creature with power 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. So if anything else, if Helga is a huge creature, we could just tap it and dump it all into a Walking Ballista. But there is also another combo you could use with Walking Ballista, and that's using Heliod's Uncrowned and Walking Ballista itself. This combo is pretty easy to set up. You give lifelink to Walking Ballista, you ping somebody for damage, Heliod will trigger, putting a 1/1 counter on Walking Ballista, then you just ping everybody into the face, gaining all that life. But again, I didn't really throw this combo in the deck all willy-nilly. There's a purpose to have Heliod Suncrowned in the deck too, mainly because whenever you gain life, you put a 1/1 counter on a target creature or enchantment you control. And would you look at that, Helga is going to be gaining life when you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, so that way you could buff up Helga a little bit further so that you could tap for more mana. However, that's going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Helga Skittish Seer. This is one of my favorite commanders of this entire set, easily. This is basically like the jack of all trades for what you want to do with a big giant creature deck. The only problem I do have with this is the fact that I do have a Bernard Ginger Sculptor deck. I try not to have the same color combinations as decks itself, but I might have to replace that with Helga Skittish Seer because this is absolutely adorable and I love frogs, and this is just a crazy powerful ability that it does have. But this is easily one of my favorite commanders of the entire set. Let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts and opinions about Helga? Do you plan on building it? Again, I would love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Also, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.